Welcome back to Racing Rundown, and I want to say a special welcome to our YouTube listeners. This is episode number 131. For those of you who are listening on our various podcast platforms, this is the normal way of listening for you, but we have been away from YouTube for a while. I think it's about 3 months since the last time we put out a YouTube video, and I do apologize for that for our YouTube subscribers who are listening to this. Life just got super hectic for both of us, and so we were not able to put out regular videos on YouTube over the course of the remainder of the summer and into the fall. But we have been continuously updating Racing Rundown on our various podcast platforms, which though there will be a link to those in the description for the listeners on YouTube. If you want to keep up with us more regularly, that is 100% the place to go for that. Our various platforms, iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts at, you'll find us there. So whatever, again, your preference. The place you can depend on the most for Racing Rundown is on the podcast, but we are, and given that we are not going to be able to do individual previews for all 14 Breeders' Cup races just for the sake of us not having the time to put them out. So to compensate for that, I am putting the big Breeders' Cup Picks show on YouTube. And there will be timestamps for this. If anyone's listening to the first couple minutes of this video and daunted by the length of the video, don't worry, there will be timestamps in the description. So if you're only looking into certain races or you care more about others than you do some of the other ones, you can skip to the races that you care about and watch the video that way. I thought it would be considerate to the listeners because this is going to be a very long episode, and I wanted to give every race its fair shake because we're not going to have the time to go through each of them in their individual preview on YouTube. But with that being mentioned, we're not going to get into Breeders' Cup stuff just yet because today, Monday when we're recording this, Monday the 1st, was a very unfortunate day for the sport of horse racing. Actually, a couple of very tragic stories came out today. The first one that we're going to talk about, I'm sure most people have heard as of this point. This one is absolutely tragic. We lost perennial Kentucky jockey Miguel Mena on Sunday night, the 31st, in an automobile accident. The report was that he was a pedestrian. He was struck by a vehicle and was killed as a result of that. And the news of that is just absolutely tragic, given that given that he leaves behind a wife and 2 daughters. Your heart breaks for them, their family, and everyone who knew him. And from all the things that people have been saying about Miguel Mena, he was someone that everybody loved, appreciated at the racetrack, was someone that was great to be around and everything like that. And, to lose someone like him, he's not one of the younger jockeys in the country, but still, someone who's 34 has had a long career ahead of him. It's just absolutely tragic. So I wanted to start this off and, express our condolences, certainly the podcast, myself and Eric's condolences to his family and everyone who knows him, because that situation is just absolutely tragic. And I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Eric, but if you'd like to, go ahead.
Definitely. He was a very successful jockey on his best day. I mean, we're talking about a guy who, he'd won 2 graded stakes this year, which he hadn't done for a couple years now, and he'd ridden for a lot of big outfits over the years, won big races for them, ridden in derbies and Breeders' Cups and things like that, and it's just devastating. And, not just from a career perspective, but Jack mentioned his family, and you just see in each and every tweet how well respected he was, not only now but even over the last few years. You'd see him from his own personal Twitter account, or his agents, his jockey agents, or trainers that he worked with, or his family. You could just see that this was a guy who was so well respected, not just on the track, in the jocks room, but in the world. And it just seemed like he had a very pure heart. Certainly was a good face of the sport, and seemed like he represented it well. So absolutely devastating on this standpoint. Jack did say he had a long career ahead of him. He definitely did. This was a guy who was, like I said, rode for so many, big name trainers in the Kentucky, in the Midwest, and it's just devastating. Very, very heartbreaking. No one deserves to lose their life at such a young age like he did. And I pray for his family more than anybody as they have to recover. It's great to see the GoFundMes that have already been created for him, even just in the past 12 hours for his family, how much money they have raised. And I hope that, people continue to donate to those for his family who needs it so badly right now.
100% a family that will be in not just our prayers, but I'm sure the entire racing community as a whole. And one other thing that we do have to mention, a horse who I don't really know how much fanfare this horse had, but if you're a longtime listener of Racing Rundown, you know there was a horse that all through last year and into the early part of this year, there was a horse that we spent hours and hours and hours talking about, if you add up the amount of time that we talked about him on Racing Rundown, and that was Performer. And we got a very, very unfortunate news that we lost Performer at a very young age. And, he was a horse that had so much potential in the early part of his career. You look at his victory in the Discovery, it looked like the sky was the limit for him. And it's unfortunate that he did win another graded stakes after that, but injury absolutely derailed his career. COVID really screwed him. He was one of the horses that I thought got screwed by COVID a lot more than some of the other horses. And, he didn't come back the same at the end of last year, and then in the earlier part of this year was retired. And then, Eric and I were always saying to each other that his babies were going to be what vindicated our strong feelings for him. And unfortunately, we got the news that those babies will not come because we lost him today as well. And I know, Eric, you wanted to talk about him, so I'll turn it over to you because you liked him even before I did.
Yeah, I mean, this was a horse that I fell in love with very early on in his career when he broke his maiden at Belmont in June of 2019 and his allowance win at Saratoga after that. Just in remembrance, I would love for people to go back and watch that August 24th, race 4 at Saratoga. It's one of my favorite races of all time. Just from that moment on, you knew he was going to be something special, and he didn't live up to the expectations. I really thought, he could be a generational talent. He never lived up to that necessarily, but he certainly showed glimpses of it. COVID and injuries absolutely, chipped away at his career. And then obviously, me and Jack, we mentioned when he retired how excited we were for his babies because I was guaranteeing to people he was going to be something special in the breeding shed, and obviously that's not going to happen. It's unfortunate. Any young horse, any horse losing their life is unfortunate. Any young horse like this, though, with so much potential heading into their next career and not being able to display it at all, it's heartbreaking. Obviously for the Phipps family and Claiborne as well. I imagine Sugar McGay, he's probably devastated by this news as well. But people like me, the fans of this horse, definitely had high expectations, and it's just really unfortunate that we're never going to be able to see any of what we'd hoped would happen come to fruition for Performer. Very, very devastating.
So now we're going to move on to some lighter topics, and we will get into now our picks for the 14 Breeders' Cup races. Our regular podcast listeners will know we usually do a segment, Maiden Watch. We will cover that next week. Eric and I already worked it out that we're going to cover last weekend's and the upcoming weekend's maidens on the Breeders' Cup recap episode. So we're going to get into now the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf Sprint, the first of 14 races. And this race was not easy, not that any Breeders' Cup race is. Conventional wisdom would tell you the last couple of years this race has been dominated by Wesley Ward. Averly Jane is the morning line favorite right now in this race, and likely will go off favorite in here. Wesley Ward has won the two of the first 3 runnings with his horses, and both of them going in were consensus absolute singles in their juvenile turf sprints. And some people might think that with Averly Jane, but this race is a lot more. There's a lot more to this race than would meet the eye. I certainly struggled with which horses to go with in here, just because it was so loaded with horses that had a strong potential to run this race. It is also worth mentioning that there are only 12 horses running in here. The 2 13 and 14 horses are also eligible because they only run 12 horses in turf sprints at Del Mar. But given all the different ways you can go, and I can spend 15 minutes talking about how many different ways I thought of going in this race. There's one race on this card. I told myself going in when I was handicapping, there's one race where I'm going to save to give my big bomb in, and that was this race I decided to go with. And the horse I'm going to go with is Run Curtis Run, and I will elaborate more on him when I get to the Juvenile Turf, because the horse that I pick has a lot to do with Run Curtis Run. But Run Curtis Run is a horse that only has one turf start, but the second place finish in the futurity behind Slipstream was a very nice effort for him. And you can also look at it in that he's cutting back a little bit, but that's not the reason why I'm picking him. His first career run on turf, and it is worth mentioning, his 3 runs before that were dirt races. One of them was originally supposed to be a turf race. It came off, but 2 other races were dirt, and that's why I'm not reading into the 8th place finish that he had in the funny side, because he's running on a different surface than that race. Wasn't, he's got a lot of turf in his pedigree, and that something, the pedigree coupled with the fact that he ran so well behind a horse who I think very highly of, and spoiler alert, I will be picking Slipstream in the Juvenile Turf. The fact that I'm picking the horse who beat him, and he ran so well in his first career start on turf. Mike Maker's done this before with long shots. I feel like this is the Mike Maker long shot that if I let him get away, I'm going to be thinking about it for 12 months like I've been thinking about letting Fire at Will go off at 30-1 like I did last year. So I'm not going to make that same mistake. Run Curtis Run is going to be my pick in the Juvenile Turf Sprint to kick off our Breeders' Cup picks for this year.
And I think that's an excellent pick. I do want to say there's a stat that I've seen kind of sprinkled around, especially during the Del Mar meet when it came to these turf sprints going 5 furlongs. People love to point out that the 1 and 2 posts were winning over 50% of the time, but I think a lot of people aren't thinking about how many horses were in those races. We're talking about 6, 7, 8 horse fields. They weren't typically filling the turf sprints at Del Mar to the brim. So if you do see that stat spread around it all, just take it with a grain of salt, because we're talking about 12 horse fields, world-class horses. They're not your typical allowance or claimers that you were seeing over the summer at Del Mar. So just keep that in mind. And that's why I think outside speed, I think Jack's pick is excellent. I'm going to be going, though, with a Euro in this spot in the Juvenile Turf Sprint, something I have typically avoided when it came to the 3-year-old and up turf sprint, and then obviously the first few renditions of this race. But Del Mar last year certainly opened my eyes to things, obviously, with the big run in the victory of Glass Slippers. But even the Juvenile Turf Sprint that was run last year, the 3rd and 4th place finishers, both Europeans, and they both ran excellent races. Now, I know that Keeneland track probably caters to them a bit more than Del Mar would initially, but I've been thinking a lot about this race over the past few months because I've been going back to the 2017 Breeders' Cup. And on the Saturday undercard, they ran the Qatar Racing Juvenile Turf Sprint. It wasn't a Breeders' Cup race officially yet, but it was kind of one of the few trial runs they did of this race to see if it was a feasible Breeders' Cup race. And obviously, they put it into the Breeders' Cup lineup after those races. But you go back to that 2017 running, the top 4 finishers were Euros, which is crazy to think because this race has been dominated by Americans, specifically Wesley Ward, over the years. Well, I think the big thing is that Wesley Ward has dominated this race with horses that you basically knew were locks to win the race heading in 4-wheel drive and Golden Pal. It was very hard to find reasons to pick against them, and if you were really trying to take a shot if you were going with other horses. And I just don't see that horse this year. Yeah, Averly Jane's been really good. Twilight Gleaming's been okay in Europe. I think her morning line is a bit lower than I think it should be. And then you have the long shot Coffee Maker, who I think honestly has the best chance of the 3 of them. Like I said, I don't think there's that dominant force. I think there's a lot of speed. Averly Jane, one-timer, a couple others like Twilight Gleaming, they're going to go quick early on. I wanted an off-the-pace horse. I didn't mind picking a Euro this year, so I'm going to be on Armor for Ryan Moore and Richard Hannon. This is a horse who's been running with the best in Europe. I mean, he's been running in all of their biggest sprint races, and he's been running really big races every single time. He comes to the plate, and he takes a big swing, and he misses, occasionally, but he also runs huge every now and then. And, I think this is kind of a step down in class, if you will, for him in this spot. I think he's going to get a lot of pace in front of him. Ryan Moore actually won that 2017 Juvenile Turf Sprint. So it all adds up, in my opinion. I think you're getting a price on him that is he's going to be an overlay if he's anywhere near that morning line, given the company he was keeping in Europe. And you consider who the favorites in this race have been beating. It doesn't really add up in my mind. So I think Armor can pull off a minor upset here and give the Euros their first win in the Juvenile Turf Sprint.
So now we're going to move on to the first dirt race of the Breeders' Cup weekend, and this is the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies. And this was a race that changed a lot in complexion of the race from pre-entries until now. We originally started out, we thought we were going to get around 10, maybe 11 horses, and it was eventually whittled down to 6. And some of the probables even before the race, we could have gotten a lot more. But so certainly unfortunate that we only end up with 6 horses in here, and there were some people on social media complaining about the field size for this race and the filly and mare sprint, which we'll get to a little bit later on the episode. And I certainly understand it for this race. given that there were a lot of promising looking 2-year-old fillies. In fact, the Tempted at Belmont Park came up very nicely, and a couple of those horses from the Tempted, you argue, may have been able to run here. Nest was pre-entered, one of the ones that opted for the Tempted over this race, but still a race that's worth looking into. Obviously, the big favorite right now in the morning line is Echo Zulu. Her 2 Grade 1 wins have been very flashy, and everyone has talked about how great of a 2-year-old filly she is, and she has been very good. I'm not going to take away from the fact that she has won 2 races very, very nicely, but you can probably tell by the tone I'm taking, I am going against her in this race, just because I'm not 100% convinced that she's a lock in this race. And there are a couple horses that I bounce back and forth with. Originally, I thought I was going to take a shot in this race, but the pace scenario that I thought was going to be there kind of collapsed with Ain't Easy dropping out and couple other horses not showing up over the past couple of weeks. So I ended up on Hidden Connection in this race, and Hidden Connection is a horse that caught a lot of people's eyes after her win in the Pocahontas, and you can understand why, because 9 1/4 lengths, I certainly really liked her after that effort. I thought that of the races at the time, that was the most impressive, taking the Grade 1, the Spinaway, the Grade 1 that Grace Adler won, and then that race. I thought of the 3, that was the most impressive, and then there were a couple other regional horses that may have been considered at that time. I still think that. And the fact that she did that, stretching out from breaking her maiden at 5.5 furlongs at Colonial Downs to going to a 1.16 mile Breeders' Cup prep race and winning by 9 1/4 lengths, that was very impressive for me. But in terms of this race, the reason why I'm going to her is because she drew inside of the other speed horses in here. She drew inside of Juju's Map and Echo Zulu. And I think that honestly is, coupled with the 9 1/4 length victory that she had in her graded stakes effort in the Pocahontas, that was enough for me to justify it. And like I said, this is a horse that I have been very high on since she won that Pocahontas stakes. Not that you wouldn't be high on a horse that won by this much, but the reason I'm going with her in this race is, number one, because the post position. I think that she's going to get the better position between her and her Echo Zulu and Juju's Map. And it's not like she was 100% on the lead. She did pull back to second and was trailing about 1.5 lengths at the half-mile pole in that Pocahontas. And if anyone's eager to get into a speed duel, I don't really think that they're going to. Like I said, the pace scenario kind of collapsed in this race over the past couple of days. She can pull back, but I don't think that that's going to be a worry with her. And at the end of the day, she's got the most visually impressive final race, and I am going to say that even over Echo Zulu's Frazette. That being said, I do want to throw out one value horse in here. Sequist is a horse that, and she may not, she's 15 to 1 on the morning line. She may not be that price, but she's run very well in her last 2 races. I really liked her effort behind Juju's Map and Distinctly Possible in the Alcibiades Stakes at Keeneland. So if she's 15 to 1 or higher around that, throw a show wager on her, because there's there's an even chance that she finishes in the top 3 in this race. And at the price she could potentially be, that could be a nice payout for you. So she's my value horse in here, but my top pick is Hidden Connection.
Totally. I agree with a lot of the points you brought up, Jack. It's actually pretty funny. When me and Jack were discussing who we were going with before this, he told me he was going with Hidden Connection, and I told him I'm going with Juju's Map. That's who my pick is. And it's funny because we both said that yesterday when we were thinking about this race, we flip-flopped. You wanted to go with Juju's Map, and I wanted to go with Hidden Connection. So pretty funny there. The reason I jumped off of Hidden Connection was I'm just a little worried about what she's going to do, because she's going to be inside of Echo Zulu. Is she going to have to engage Echo Zulu early on so she can hold position on the rail without getting dirt in her face? Or is she going to send and kind of battle with her early on? I think they'll all be nice to each other. I don't think it's going to be that big of a thing, but that was kind of my biggest concern. Ultimately, I went with Juju's Map because I think she's probably the safest pick. I think that she's going to be able to sit, third or fourth, riding behind those top 2, because I do think that will be her top 2 early on, Echo Zulu and Hidden Connection. I think she'll just be able to sit right on their hip, if not a length or 2 further back, and just kind of watch them. Let the leaders do their thing, like he did in the Alcibiades, and then take full advantage. And I've really fluctuated with this horse. I did not like her initially after the Alcibiades. After watching that race a couple times over that next week, I was like, okay, I think she's a legit contender. And the last few days after pre-entries came out, did a lot of replay watching. I'm like, I just don't see how she's better than some of the horses in here. And then I watched the Alcibiades a couple more times, and I'm like, she has a lot going for her. with how she ran that day, because she had to send hard from the rail, but she really came back to Florentru when he needed her to after that big long shot came over from the outside to take the lead. She just did everything that Florentru asked her to do, and it was really classy and professional, and I don't see why that changes in this spot. So Juju's not for me, but I'd be lying if I said it's really close between her and Hidden Connection. You can go with either of those horses and be happy. I think you can beat Echo Zulu because she seems like a sprinter to me, kind of like Jackie's Warrior was last year. Obviously, different circumstances. She has a pedigree that seems like she could get the 2 turns, but just with how she's ran in her wins to this point, she just seems like a sprinter to me. And with that outside post and a 2-turn race for the first time, I'm scared. Also, I do want to mention one really cool thing to me before we move on to the next race. The one Desert Dawn, I think she might be able to pick up some pieces late underneath. She didn't run too bad last time out. But she's also the first Arizona bred that will ever compete in the Breeders' Cup. That's pretty cool to me. I'm a University of Arizona student. I've lived in Arizona since, for about 10 years now. So very cool to see an Arizona bred running in a Breeders' Cup race. So it'd be very cool if she won on that front.
And now we're going to move on to race number 3 on this Breeders' Cup episode, and that is the Juvenile Fillies Turf. This race, this year, because of the way Del Mar runs their Breeders' Cup races, the order of these races has switched up from the past couple of years. So if you're not used to this order of races, I certainly wasn't. That is why the order may have changed. And sticking with the theme of these juvenile grass races being absolutely brutal races to go to try to pick horses out of, this race was insanely tough. There were a couple of Europeans in here that I considered heavily, and then the Juvenile Fillies Turf. If you've watched recent memory, you can never overlook Chad Brown in here. He won 3 straight races, I believe, from the period of 2016 through to 2018. Hasn't won since 2019, but he's in here with 2 horses that have a reasonably good chance. I think that of his 2, Haughty is probably the better shot of the 2, and she's also longer price on the morning line. So if Breeders' Cup Day comes around and she's not shorter price than her stablemate Consumer Spending, definitely consider using some kind of show wager on her. But also, the Chad Brown Exacta has been very lucrative over the last month, so that may be something you might want to consider in this race. I'm not personally going to go there, but given how lucrative some of these Grade 1 Breeders' Cup races have been, with Chad Brown horses running 1-2, something that you can't overlook in this race, especially if these horses want to go off somewhat near 8 and 10 to 1. But moving on to the horses that I bounced around between, I was thinking of a few Europeans. I originally was really liked Hello You, and eventually looking into Hello You, it led me to the horse that I ended up picking in here, number 13, Mise en Scène. Mise en Scène has had a very strong campaign as of late this year in Europe. And the other thing that's good for her is, she has run her races over the when she's been running in races that were the track was good or good to firm, she's run her race, and she didn't run bad the one time she ran in over a good to soft surface. So, and I know that's something that may get overanalyzed this weekend by people. I'm not going to be overanalyzing that. The thing is, 2 victories, one of the ones she beat Hello You in, so that was certainly a positive for me. But looking at her last race, which was the Group 1 where she ran 4th, she got going late in that race, and that's why she ended up finishing 4th in there. But the horse who won, Inspiral, is the best 2-year-old filly in Europe, so obviously she wasn't going to beat her. But she was a long neck away from being Group 1, second in a Group 1 behind the best female 2-year-old in Europe. So given that, and her coming over here, and I don't think that she's up against the toughest group in the world. I think there's some good horses in here. As I mentioned earlier, the Chad Fillies are scary. Sail By had a very nice effort last out at Belmont Park, but at the end of the day, Mise en Scène is very close to being to have run second, to the best 2-year-old filly in Europe. And given that she's beaten a couple of the other horses in here, I know she was beaten by Cachet in that race, but I already mentioned she got going late and she was very, very close to catching Cachet in there. And she's already beaten Hello You, and those are the horses that I considered over from Europe. So Mise en Scène is going to be my pick in this race.
And I think if you're going with a European, you got to go with Mise en Scène. Just watch the replays, and honestly, you'll see why. I know she's one. I think she's the lowest priced of the Euros, and it makes sense. I think that's really fair. Don't be swayed by some of the others, because even though she did finish behind one of these horses recently, she clearly is the best. That being said, just diving into how this race is going to set up, it looks like Turn or Loose, not necessarily lone speed. I think at first impression it might look like that, but you have a couple horses who are coming out of sprint races who show decent speed in there, and they'll be right up there. But I wanted to go with a horse even then that's going to be slightly more forwardly placed. So I think Turner Loose is going to be on the lead. Koala Princess looks like she's going to sit second, and I really, really like Koala Princess just as a horse in general. I think she has a big chance to run well here. That being said, last year I picked Outador in the Juvenile Turf. That was a nice Wesley Ward horse. He ended up going off somewhere between 6 or 8 to 1. He was coming. He had a very similar, resume as Koala Princess up to that point, where he was coming out of 2 races before, both sprints, a win at Kentucky Downs. That was very, very impressive. Put up big numbers, big figures, all those good things. Gets to the Juvenile Turf of the Breeders' Cup. Goes out to the lead, gets a pretty favorable setup, but he just can't hang on. He had, flashes too much speed early. Can't really, he settled, but he didn't really settle enough as he needed to win, but he still ran a good third. I think Koala Princess runs that same race. But that being said, obviously you have to go somewhere else. I think you need to go with one of the 3 horses that are going to be setting up right in behind that top 2 of Turner Loose and Koala Princess. That's going to be Cairo Memories, Bubble Rock for Brad Cox, or Sail By. I was ultimately between Sail By and Cairo Memories and went with Cairo Memories because I think she's going to be able to save the most ground. You look at the Breeders' Cup from 2017 and just Del Mar races in general. If you can sit that pocket trip, that second flight behind the leaders at the rail, you are going to get a clean run through. It's just on you to take advantage. So I think Kentis Ormo is going to be able to sit a really good trip on the inside in that second, third flight, third, fourth, or fifth, get a really good run on the lead coming into the stretch, and then take off from there. I mean, this is a filly who's done a lot of good things in her career to this point. 2 wins, dominant wins at that. Just putting up, big performance after big performance. It's been very, very impressive to see. Obviously, she's facing the toughest horses she's ever had to face, but so is 13 other fillies in this spot. And I think she's going to work out the best trip, getting back to a track we already know she likes. So Cairo Memories, I do think that she'll take more money. I wouldn't be surprised if she ends up going off single digits, but I'm okay with that because I do think she's the best horse in the race. Final thought on this. I know I've had a lot for the Juvenile Fillies Turf, but Sail By, I know I did mention her as kind of my final 2. Don't be surprised if she runs a big race as well. I think she's going to lose some ground that's going to prevent her from winning, but I think the reason she's 20 to 1 is because those speed figures aren't big. Take this into account when you're handicapping these Juvenile Turf races for the Breeders' Cup this year. I have noticed a trend in recent years, and this year especially, that all the speed figures, whether it's Brisnet, Bayer, Timeform, whatever, they don't give the Belmont Juvenile Turf preps any respect. The Miss Grillo, either the Futurity of the Matron for the turf sprints, and then, of course, the Pilgrim for the Colts. Those races get horrible figures each and every year. Do not care about the figures when it comes to those horses if you're considering them, because they are low every year. And as we saw last year, Fire at Will had some of the worst figures in that race, the Juvenile Turf, and he went out and won it. So do not take those into account when you're handicapping the Juvenile Turf races, those Belmont speed figures, because they are wrong. They are low and they are wrong.
And now we're going to move on to what normally is the feature race on Future Stars Friday, but it is not this year because of the reason I already explained with Del Mar changing the order of these races. And this is the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. This race has 20 points on the line for the 2022 Kentucky Derby, which to me seems crazy that we're already talking about that, but it's here now, and we have 12 horses in this race. And this race on paper may look like it's very cut and dry. Take your pick between the 2 Grade 1 winners, either Jack Christopher or Corniche in this race. But if you listen to our big recap episode after the Grade 1s the first weekend of October, you know that neither of us like either the 2 favorites in here. I will mention right now, because I realize that there might be some YouTube viewers who have not seen that recap. I think Jack Christopher is a very good horse. I think that he is a potential Grade 1 winner next year in some of these one-turn races. But the Champagne has had a trend as of late. And most of the Champagne winners have been one-turn specialist horses. The exception to the rule was, of course, Tiz the Law when he won it in 19, going on to be a 3-year-old in 2020. Every other horse that has won the Champagne since, I believe, 2014 was a one-turn specialist. And, you go through horses like Practical Joke, Firenze Fire, who are great one-turn horses. And obviously Jackie's Warrior, who we'll get to later on in this episode. Great one-turn horses, great sprinters, but when it got out to 2 turns for them, it didn't work out for them. So that's why I'm against Jack Christopher here, just because I don't think he wants to go this far. His win reminded me a lot of Complexity's win in the 2018 Champagne. And now, that doesn't mean that I think he'll run like Complexity did in the 2018 Juvenile, but it just looked a lot to me like the Complexity race, where he has the glaring red flag of probably a one-turn mile is close to the max for him. As for Corniche, I've just never been impressed by anything that he's done as of late. And I said about him going into the American Pharoah. If you're a speed figure person, Eric just talked about speed figures, and that's going to set the tone. We're not a speed figure podcast, so if you're here looking to get the best speed figures in the race, that's not what we're going to give you. And I don't mind that, just because that's not the way that either of us look at races. But my point going into the American Pharoah was, if you're someone like me and you don't look into the speed figures, Corniche is not for you, but he may be for you if you like the speed figures. And after the American Pharoah, the speed figure did not come back well for Corniche, so that really just took me off of him, just because I didn't like him anyway, and the one positive that you could have found in him wasn't there after the American Pharoah. I just did not see anything positive in the American Pharoah. He might just be better than this group, but I don't think that this is a stellar group of 2-year-olds anyway, so I'm even if I'm wrong here, I'm not going to fret too much, because I don't think he's that good of a racehorse, even if he is able to win this race. And that being mentioned, this was another race where I decided to take a bit of a shot in here, but I don't think this is to the degree of my shot in the Juvenile Turf Sprint, even though they're the same price on the morning line. The horse that I'm ending up on here is Double Thunder. Now, I will say the horse that I was going to pick in here was going to be Rattle and Roll. But unfortunately, Rattle and Roll on Sunday, we learned, was not going to run in the Juvenile. So that completely threw off my train of thought of what I was going to do. I really liked Command Performance's runner-up effort behind Jack Christopher. But my rule of thumb in these races is, if a horse is everybody else's wise guy horse, he's not my wise guy horse. And that is the case, I think, with Command Performance. He's 5-1 right now on the morning line. And remember, he's a maiden, but I think a lot of people are going to start catching on to it. And at least for me, if I'm going against favorites like Corniche or Jack Christopher, I want to do it with a horse that has a decent price. And while I really like Command Performance, I just think that the price is going to be too short for me. And the general rule of thumb that I always abide by, if he's everyone else's wise guy horse, he's not my wise guy horse. And that could potentially be what Double Thunder is, though, because his effort behind Rattle and Roll in the Breeders' Futurity was a very nice effort. He had to close at Keeneland, which everybody knows is not the easiest thing to do. The race didn't shape up for him that well. He still ran a very fine second. He's got a couple other stakes win to his name. His effort in the Sapling and in the Bashford Manor way back in the earlier part of this year was very nice, and he did have some problems at the start in the Saratoga Special, so that could excuse his one out-of-the-money effort. But, I think he's worth a shot in here. I think that both the favorites are beatable in here. I'm not, for the reasons I already went over, and I'm not crazy about anyone else in here. Like I said, I liked Command Performance's effort, but I didn't like it that much to go with him when he may be third choice in the race. So that's where I'm going in this race, and I'll turn it over to Eric now, who is on a similar train of thought to me as well.
Definitely. And this race is what I like to call an hourglass race. You have a bunch of horses that want to be on the lead. You have a bunch of horses that want to be dead last, and nothing in between. An hourglass shape, if you're to draw it up on paper. And honestly, no matter what, when you have a race like that, that means you probably are going to have to go with one of those off-the-pace horses, because they're not going to be affected by having that many horses around them if everybody else in the race wants to be up on the front end as well. And you do have a couple of horses that you could consider stalker types. That would be like maybe your Barossa or your Tough to Tame, but both of those horses, just on talent, really don't seem good enough in here. And then I echo those sentiments on Jack Christopher and Corniche. Corniche drawing 12 was a death sentence. I mean, you just have to go back to Boltoro in 2017 and look at how that turned out. And I think Boltoro is a better horse than Corniche ever will be. So point is, it does not seem like either of those horses drawing the outside for Corniche and then Jack Christopher drawing the rail and likely having to send from that post. It just seems like a recipe for disaster. So because of that, like I said, off the pace, I was thinking about Double Thunder and Command Performance as well, but I had to go back to a horse I've been vigorously defending since his run in the American Pharoah last out, and that's Oviatt Class. I mean, this is a horse I loved when he broke his maiden, he proved so much to me. Even though he lost the American Pharoah, he had to make up so much ground on a track that was catering so much to speed horses. And you just have to look at how much of the gap he made up on Coronation Papa Cap in the final quarter of a mile, or really the eighth of a mile, to see that race did not, show just by where he finished how good he actually is. And of course, his gallop out was huge. All those good things. But what I think the real key is going back to that August 27th maiden breaking performance for Oviatt class. It was his third career start. Keith DeSormo horses typically take a while to break their maiden, but it was his first start going 2 turns on the dirt, which was big. He had a 2-turn turf start, first out, not going to go well. Sprinted next time, not going to go well. 2-turn dirt race. He came from second to last. He made up almost 8 lengths on these horses, but he won by 4 1/4 and did it impressively. Now, you look at those fractions in that race. This is really important with this horse. You look at the fractions in that race, and you're like, they went 22 for the opening quarter, 45 and 4 for the half. I mean, they were ripping. Of course he's going to make up that ground and win for fun. Look a little closer. That second internal quarter mile, so not that first one that went 22 seconds, but that second internal quarter mile went in about 23.4 seconds. That's kind of catering to the leaders. And then you go to that half mile to the 3/4 mark. That was almost 26 seconds right there. So these leaders were really starting to crawl after going quick early, and they held their position really well. You look at the chart, the horses that were first, second, third, fourth finished relatively close to the front of this race. And Oviatt class mowed them down with ease, and most of the closers in that race didn't end up making up that much ground. So that maiden win was very impressive. And of course it came over this Del Mar surface. American Pharoah, like I mentioned, race didn't set up for him at all. Track was playing against him, still made up tons of ground. He gets the setup here over a track he loves. I am very confident in this pick, as you can probably tell, because that maiden win was 10 times more impressive than I had initially thought, and I initially thought it was very, very impressive. So I'm in love with this horse. I think he runs a big race. I'm a little worried that I have Kent DeSormo going back-to-back in Breeders' Cup races, not because I think Kent DeSormo was a bad jockey. I think he's been riding out of his mind this year. Just, Breeders' Cup jockeys don't typically win 2 in a row, but this horse should not be 20-1 on the morning line. He should not be lower than Jasper Great, who was shipping over from Japan with 1 start. So I'm just saying, this horse is a must-use underneath at least, but you better play him on top if you think he has a remote chance of winning, because I'm positive he'll put in a big, big performance.
And now we're going to move on to the final race from Future Stars Friday, which is the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf. And rounding out the 5 juvenile races, this one was probably the toughest of all of them. Once again, to echo what I said about all the earlier races, 17 different places you could have gone in this race. Not exactly being a little hyperbolic there because there were only 14 horses, but so many different ways you can go. Do you want to go with the European? Do you want to go with Chad Brown? He's always dangerous. He's got a horse here who ran a very bang-up second behind a horse who, unfortunately, is not here in Annapolis, but, may be the best 2-year-old turf horse in America. And then you also have to take into account the fact that, last time, when the Breeders' Cup is run in California, you have some of these local horses that run huge races in there. Doug O'Neill's in this race with a horse named McKinnon, who has 2 nice stakes wins, one at Del Mar, one at Santa Anita, and I believe he also broke his maiden here. And then you also have, your typical horses. Tiz the Bomb had a very nice stakes win in the Bourbon, and Mike Makers here with another 20-1 horse. I'm not going with Stolen Base, even though I did give it some thought, but ultimately, I considered several different horses in here. I really liked the shorter price of the Godolphin Duo Modern Games. I ultimately went off him because I didn't like the rail draw, and I also wasn't a big fan that he's probably going to get figured out, and he's probably going to be everyone else's wise guy horse in here. So the horse that I ended up going with in this race is the Futurity winner, Slipstream. Now, you might wonder why I'd be picking a horse who won a 6-furlong prep race for the Juvenile Turf Sprint in a race that's a mile, but Slipstream in his races has looked like a mile. It is going to be, he looks like he wants longer, and a mile certainly shouldn't be a big problem for Slipstream. You look at the Futurity, he was catching up ground late, and like I already said, I picked Run Curtis Run earlier, so if I picked Run Curtis Run, I have to respect the horse who beat him in there, and I certainly do. His effort there in Victory in the Futurity was very nice. He had to make up a lot of ground in there and wound up winning. And I think if you give him more distance, he just ends up winning that race by more. You go back to his excuse me, not sure if it's a maiden breaking effort. It was his maiden breaking effort. I do apologize. Didn't have the stats in front of me. His maiden breaking effort at Belmont Park. He won that by 5 3/4 lengths, going 7 furlongs. And the other thing about him is he's very versatile. He can be on the lead like he was in his maiden breaking effort, or he can be at the back like he was in that futurity. He's versatile. There's several different ways you can go in here, and that's something, a race that setup of it looks rather hairy. That's something that it is certainly valuable with a horse. I'm not reading too much into 2 of his losses. One of them was a race that came off the turf, so that automatically doesn't matter for me. And then his first career start, he had some problems at the start, and at the end of the day, that is his first career start, and that was a rather early start to his career. So I'm not really reading too much into those. The last 2 efforts, though, were very good. He's versatile. He's got that graded stakes win, and I also picked the horse who he beat second in another Breeders' Cup race. So I have to like Slipstream in here, and he's one of many horses that has a shot in here. Although I will mention, I'm not going to let Mike Maker go without saying that Stolen Base, if he doesn't get screwed on the far turn like he did in the Bourbon, and even if he does get screwed on the far turn, he did have a very nice closing kick in the Bourbon. So he's a horse that if he's around 20-1 or higher, absolutely use him underneath in some facet, because he has a massive chance to run well in here.
And this was a very tough race for me. I like Slipstream quite a bit, but I also like most of the horses in this spot. It is just tough because it's tough to get a sense of how it's going to set up. I mean, setup in these turf races are so important, and it's just hard to get a read on who's going to for sure go to the lead, who's going to sit right off of the lead. If the leader is a horse like Coinage, who has gone wire to wire before, is that horse really good enough to take this field wire to wire? And it's not like he's gone, first call to that stall in any other race but the With Anticipation. And then you have Portfolio Company, who went out to the lead in his last start and ran a big race in the Pilgrim. But is he really going to go to the lead? Point is, there's no telling. So I think you just have to go with the horse you like the most. And for me, that is McKinnon. Jack did touch on how good this horse was. And let me tell you, this race has been ran, I don't know, this is the 14th, 15th running of the Juvenile Turf. California has never had a representative in a Juvenile Turf race like this. This horse is something special. In my opinion, his 3 wins at Del Mar, 2 of them, and then, of course, the Zuma Beach last time out, which was the most impressive. We're talking about a horse who, heading into the backstretch, clipped heels really badly and lost probably 4 lengths, and then still won by 2 1/4. Very impressively, stretching out beautifully. Just the stride on this horse is poetry in motion. I love watching this horse run, and I've just fallen in love with him over the past few weeks, and I've just been very impressed with him. He knows how to be tactical. That's why I'm not too worried about the setup with him. I think that, if Juan Hernandez needs to put him up first, second, third, he can do that. The horse will be responsive to that. I think he might want to target, but at the same time, he doesn't really need it. If he needs to come from 5-6 lengths back, he can do that too. So I just think, like I said, with how this is setting up, and it's hard to figure out how it's setting up, you might as well just go with the horse you have the most confidence in on talent. And for me, that's 1,000% McKinnon. I've been so impressed. I can't believe, if you had told me a month ago or 2 months ago that I was going to be picking California-based horses in both of the 2-turn Juvenile Turf races, I would have thought you were crazy, but I think they both have big chances. And McKinnon probably, I know I said Ovia Class is my most confident pick of Friday, but McKinnon is a very close second.
And now we're going to move on to the next race, which is the first race on Saturday, which is the Filly and Mare Sprint. And we're not going to spend, the two of us are not going to spend too much time on this race. For me, I went against Gamine last year. I felt like in hindsight, it was trying to grasp at straws, and I'm just not going to do that again this year. I understand, people like Bella Sofia. Bella Sofia did have her nice win in the test, but for me, it's just that, Gamine has never lost going one turn, in her career ever. And, what Bella Sofia did at Saratoga was nice, but at the end of the day, she's going up against a better horse than she's ever gone up against in her career. And I know Gamine is not the horse she was when she was running last year, but she still has never lost good sprinting, and she's got 2 Grade 1 wins. So I'm going to go with Gamine in here, really cut and dry for me at least.
Same boat in here. She should take care of business with these. There's a reason that nobody is showing up to face her, and that's because she's just dominant. I appreciate Bella Sofia being here. She's been good, but she has not proven anything to this point in terms of beating Gamine. I mean, yeah, the wins have been nice. The numbers are nice and shiny and pretty, but she's not beating anybody in the process. Graded stakes level horses, sure, but that's about it. I don't see how Gamine loses this race. She should take care of business, wrap up another nice divisional honor.
And now we're going to move on to the next race on the Breeders' Cup card, and that is the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint. This race, once again, like every other turf sprint, so wide open, so many different horses you can go with. Once again, only 12 horses. There are 4 also eligibles, but with there being less horses in here than normal, didn't make this race any easier. I was saying several times to Eric, I really wish that they were at Santa Anita running on the downhill turf course, because there are a lot of horses here that I would have given a really strong chance to win there that I'm a little bit skeptical about now. One thing I will say before I get to the horse that I'm picking in here, going back to that local horse feel, I considered Lieutenant Dan very heavily, but he's 6-1 on the morning line, and I think a lot of people are going to pick up on that, that he's been very good. He's a local horse, but I still expect him to run a very big race, just because I think that he's going to be a shorter price than I would prefer to use him at. He's still going to run huge. So, if you're looking for triples or exotic wagers, I wouldn't leave him out. And if you're playing any kind of pick 3 or something with this race, he would be a horse that I would use because he's got a huge chance to run well. That being said, a lot of people are talking about this Breeders' Cup race, or this Breeders' Cup in general, saying that there are so many locks on this card. Over the 2 days. And I just don't see it that way. And one of the horses that has been being floated as a single for the entire year, basically, is Golden Pal, last year's winner. And you can understand why, because when he's been running in the United States, he's just been better than all the horses he's going up against. But he seems vulnerable in here. Yeah, his victory at Keeneland last out was very impressive. He looked like he was going to give in mid-stretch, and then he went on to win huge like he has done in his other previous starts in America. But the Nunthorpe Stakes over at York has just left such a bad taste in my mouth. And I said I don't know whether or not I said this on the podcast, but I said it to Eric that all I needed to see from him, I didn't need to see him go over there and win. I just needed to see him go over there and give a good account of himself and not get embarrassed. He ran 7th, and that was not giving a good account of himself. And since then, it's just left such a bad taste in my mouth about him. And I think that he's beatable in here. And the reason, he's going to be a short price in here, understandably so, because when he has run in the United States, he's been brilliant. But I think I can beat him in here. Maybe it's misguided, but I don't know. He's going to be a short price in here. Got to go against some favorites. That the Breeders' Cup dictates that. He's going to be one of the ones I go against. And the horse I'm going to go against him with is the horse that ran second to him last out at Keeneland, and that's Extravagant Kid. Extravagant Kid has been a world traveler throughout the last year. He only has has 2 runs stateside this year in stakes races, and I actually have to further correct myself again because he did run on New Year's Day. So he has 3 runs stateside, but the last 3 runs have been in Dubai, at Royal Ascot, and in July Cup at Newmarket. Now, you may say, well, you threw out Golden Pal because he got himself embarrassed in July Cup, in the Nunthorpe. Extravagant Kid got himself embarrassed in the July Cup. What changes that there? I understand that, and that's maybe the flaw with this argument. But once again, Golden Pal is going to be a big favorite in here. I got to go against some favorites, and sometimes you're going to be grasping at straws to go against favorites. And maybe you don't respect this pick as much because it sounds like I'm grasping at straws with it, but Extravagant Kid has been very, very consistent throughout his entire career running in the United States. You can go through and see all the grade 1 graded stakes placings, because there aren't many grade 1s turfs running. You go see all the graded stakes placings and on the board finishes he's had in these races. He has just been a consistency machine in the United States. And that being said, I know that I took away credit for Golden Pal for getting beat over at York in the Nunthorpe, but to be honest, they're running in their home country, and the Europeans are having to come over here and do something that for a while we didn't think they could do. Obviously, Glass Slippers won it last year. She was the first one to do it, but for a while, you didn't pick a European in the turf for that reason. But that being mentioned, long part short, I think I can beat Golden Pal in here. Don't really have something that I can put on it aside from the Nunthorpe I wasn't too crazy about. And Extravagant Kid has just been so consistent stateside in his career that it's really hard to overlook him. He's such a nice price on the morning line. If he's anywhere around 12, 15-1. I'm going to absolutely be all over him. I have no idea where the odds are going to go in this race because I'm awful at predicting where odds are based on morning line, so I'm not going to try to do that. But if he's anywhere around that, got to use him because, he's run 6 races this year. He's finished in all of them. And it is also worth mentioning, the Group 1 that he ran third at, he ran huge in that race. And also was a Group 1 winner in the Alquaz over at Maidan. So that one bad race, yeah, but he does have other good races overseas. So it's not like Golden Pal where he has the one bad race. So maybe grasp at straws. Maybe you don't like the pick, but I got to take my shot against Golden Pal because I think he's the favorite I can beat.
And I'm also going against Golden Pal. A couple favorites that I'll be going against on Saturday. This one, not surprising though, I think, because I think there's a good amount of people that are going to, while he will still be favored more than likely, there's a good amount of people that will realize the pace in this race is going to be absurd. I mean, you have Golden Pal, Lieutenant Dan, who's an absolute mauler. Those two are going to go at it. And then you factor in Charmaine Zamia, another horse who loves to be on the lead. Then you go all the way out to a horse like Gear Jockey, who's shown his best dimensions to be closer up to the pace, especially with that win at Kentucky Downs last time out. And then a couple other horses as well that like to throw their hats in the ring early on. I think, not only going with off-the-pace horse, but why not Fast Boat? That's kind of my mindset with this pick. Fast Boat, he's 12-1 morning line, but why? Why not go with Fast Boat? Sure, he's had 2 uninspiring at first glance performances in his last 5 starts, but he also has 3 really nice wins. He's turned a corner this year. Joe Sharp seems to have figured out how to get him to settle a bit more in the afternoons. One big switch as well, I might add, was they took the blinkers off of this horse. And he's immediately gotten better since the beginning, from 2020 to 2021. But his wins have been good, and they've been going 5 furlongs and 5.5 furlongs, which, this race is 5 furlongs, and that's a distance he clearly likes. Then he, of course, you go back to that win 2 back in the Troy. Very, very impressive. But let's dive into those losses and why I'm more than willing to look past them. The Jaipur in June, 1 for 1, it was 6 furlongs, probably stretching him a little bit, but he was still making up ground late. He didn't have the greatest trip, He was trying to make a move on the turn. Seemed like he was fighting John Velasquez a little bit. Ran up on some heels just slightly while Casa Creed blew past him on the outside and won. Nobody was beating Casa Creed that day. Not a great performance. Well, because of that bad performance, he of course goes off at 10-1 in the Troy. Still wins that race because he's getting the right. Got the right trip. All those beautiful things from Tyler Gaffalione. And then you go to Kentucky Downs where he's bed down to about 9-2. That race, he had nowhere to go. In the stretch, Joel Rosario could not find anywhere. He was, in behind horses. He was in between horses, clearly uncomfortable, something that is the exact opposite of what he really wanted based off of his 3 wins this year. You got to look at it that way because you look at all of his wins, they've been impressive. They easily put him up against, these horses and show him to be very competitive. He's got really nice speed figures to go along with it, good final times. He's just done so much right at these 5 furlong distances. I also love that outside post that he drew because it's not like he's going to have to deal with, the tight quarters that he dealt with last time out at Kentucky Downs or at Belmont 3-back. It'll be similar to the Troy where Tyler Gaffalione was able to get him into the clear, or all the way back in May when he won the Twin Spires Turf Sprint on Kentucky Derby weekend. He was able to get outside of horses, watch the pace dissolve in front of him, make that big move late and get the job done. I'm telling you, there's no reason this horse should be double digits, but I think he will be because that was the trend we saw from the Jaipur to the Troy. He went off at 7-1 in the Jaipur off of back-to-back wins. Didn't run well there. Went off at double digits in the Troy. Finished 4th in the Turf Sprint. Lost to Gear Jockey and Bombard, who's on the also eligible list. I think he'll be double digits, and there's no reason to not love him, to at least run a big race, have some money on him underneath. But with how he's performed this year at these distances, there's no reason he shouldn't step up and run a massive race.
Now we're going to move on to the next race, which is the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. And this race, I wanted to really try to find a way to pick against Life is Good here. But ultimately, the race just boiled down to I wasn't crazy about anyone else in here. And Life is Good has been brilliant in all of his races, even his one defeat in his career. He lost to Jackie's Warrior, who we'll most certainly be touching on later on in this episode. And, the Kelso wasn't against any horse, but you just know that Life is Good is just a superior horse to all the rest of them. His 3 wins when he was in the Bob Baffert barn, his 2-year-old Maiden Breaker, everyone loved that. His 2 stakes wins, should be mentioned, finished in front of Medina Spirit. So, not that anyone needs to be told to pick Life is Good. He's 4-5 on the morning line, but just, further showing why he is 100% at least on paper, the best horse in this race. I know that you can make a case to go against him. Just for me, going against him is not for me in this race. Silver State's an honest horse, but I just think that at the end of the day, I'm not going to get beat trying to reach to beat a horse that I think is the best horse in the race. Although I will say this was one of the races where Eric and I were not in agreement on, and I'll turn it over to Eric, who is going to try to beat Life is Good in this race.
Yeah, I have all the respect in the world for Life is Good, but the Jerkin showed he can have chinks in his armor, and I know he beat Medina Spirit on 2 occasions early this year. That San Felipe win was impressive, but let's not forget he's had 2 uninspiring races. I think the Sham, sure, Medina Spirit ended up being this really good horse, but that doesn't change the fact that Life is Good almost lost to him, and then of course he did lose to Jackie's Warrior in the Jerkins. Now, that was awful layoff and all of those things. And that's not even why I'm going against him. It's not because I think he's a bad horse. It's because look at the horses that are coming into this race and that he's going to have to deal with on the front end. We're talking about a horse who has led every single call of every single race he's ran, other than the Jerkins against Jackie's Warrior. And that was, less than a length separated them the entire way around that track. And in all of those races, he hasn't had horses necessarily need to challenge him on the lead. No one's really tried to throw a haymaker at him in any of those races, even the Jerkins. That all changes here. Jasper Prince, the horse breaking directly to his inside, was the speed of the speed of the speed in last year's Breeders' Cup Sprint. You throw in Ginobili. Ginobili went wire to wire, freaked at Del Mar 2 starts ago, and then won the Pat O'Brien basically on the lead after not breaking well and having to adjust from that point. Peinjong, the other Japanese horse, he likes to be on the lead. I don't think they're going to take him out of his element. And then you throw in 8 Rings to the outside. He's a horse that went wire to wire when he won last time out, and he's actually in all but one of his, he's running 3 2-turn races. All but one of them, which was the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, he's tried to go wire to wire and actually has successfully done it. So point is, that's over half the field that wants to be on the lead. Sure, he can maybe adjust, but I'm just not confident that stretching out to 2 turns after 2 sprint races, he's going to be able to settle. So I went with Silver State. I think coming from off the pace, let's not forget that this horse was on an absolute tear earlier this year, won 6 races in a row from October 2020 to June of this year, which included a win in the Met Mile, including a win in the Oaklawn Handicap, beating nice horses. And then his last 2 races have not been bad at all. Sure, he lost to Knicksville, but Knicksville was the morning line favorite for the Breeders' Cup Classic. Parks Dirt Mile, he should have won that race. He got distracted late. That doesn't usually happen. I'm not worried about it. He should be in excellent shape to pick up the pieces late. I think this is a race you can beat. Life is Good in, and I think Silver State is absolutely the horse to do it in.
And now we're going to move on to the next race, which is the Filly and Mare Turf. This race, once again, a very loaded group of horses. There are so many different ways you could have gone here with this race. It's your question of whether or not you like Europeans, or whether or not you want to go with the local, consistent American horse, Warlike Goddess, who has just been putting on clinics every single time she runs this year, with the exception of her first start of her year. But we're not going to talk about that race because it's not important right now. But so many different places you can go in here. And then also you have to keep into account, not only are we looking at a European horse, we're also looking at a very, very talented Japanese mare who's coming into this race. And that's Loves Only You. Loves Only You has gotten a lot of respect coming into this race. She was rather low on the morning line, rightfully so. Same odds as Love, the 2-time English Classic race winner from a year ago, and just ahead of Warlike Goddess in terms of the amount of respect that she was given. So absolutely great race. And even you look at the horses in here, Chad Brown's pair of fillies are, they're not the greatest in the world, but they're greatest stakes winners, and they're not horses to look past. And then also the local factor going to Vegas is 12-1 in here. That could be some good value, and I would imagine that that's going to float up with the amount of money that I assume Europeans and Warlike Goddess and Loves Only You will take. So you could get a very good price on a very good going to Vegas in this race. So many different routes you can go in here. Ultimately for me though, I'm going to go to Loves Only You in here. I just thought her victory at Shatin in the QE2 stakes over there just was such a nice race. she beat a couple of very nice Japanese horses in here. Glory Vaz, who I believe won the Hong Kong Vaz in 2019, and then Daring Tact, who was the Filly Triple Crown winner in Japan a year ago. And then you go to Dubai, where she ran third behind Mishrif and Chronogenesis. And Mishrif was running some big races this year. Obviously won the Saudi Cup, beat at the time the best American horse, and then had a very nice effort. I believe it was in the international stakes where he won Group 1 there as well. And then he also, won that race against Loves Only You, and then Chronogenesis was also in there. And Chronogenesis didn't run great in the arc, but, she competed against the toughest group that she'd had to go up against, and she gave, I thought, at least a decent account of herself. And, not to say that the American horses in this race are bad, but, it's certainly something that Loves Only You has shown that she has been able to run with the level of horses that she's running. I have no doubt that she'll be able to run with the group of horses that she's going up against in here. But it was very tough. I would say, though, definitely keep an eye on the Chad Brown Exacta, because it has been, or Chad Brown trifecta with one of the favorites on top, because that has been very lucrative. And also, don't overlook going to Vegas, because the local factor certainly could be at play in this race as well.
Totally. I think you could go with any of the single-digit odd horses on the morning line and feel confident. I'm just going back to what I'm familiar with, and that is Warlike Goddess, morning line favorite. Wouldn't be surprised if she ends up going off a low second or third choice. She's just been so good this year. You just watch her replays and her races, and she's just dominating every single horse she faces. This is obviously the toughest she's ever been in, with the likes of Love and Loves Only You and everybody else, Rougier and Adaria. But at the same time, with how she's performed in those races, you can just be confident she's going to put in a big performance. Whether that's enough to win or not is a big question. I am worried about the pace setup in here. There's not a lot of speed. That's not something I've had to worry about with her, because that's what all of her wins have been like. They've been paceless races where she comes from far back and still wins. But this is obviously, like I said, toughest race she's ever been in. So how do you weigh that? I ultimately am just going to go with it. I'm not overly confident in it, but I just have loved her, how she's won her races. Her turn of foot is wicked. And I do have to add, she was coming from really far back in a lot of her races, but the Flower Bowl, I thought she showed a bit of a new dimension. She was closer to like mid-pack, or, at least, she was still back half of the field, but she was closer up than she really had ever been in any of her previous starts, which I think is really, really big for her. Still doesn't help that there's no pace in the race, but just knowing she can be a bit more tactical than we had thought from her first 6 races, that gives me a lot of confidence here. In terms of, making up that much ground on a tight track like Del Mar, don't worry about it. She was able to handle a track like Gulfstream. So I think that there's a lot of questions you could ask, but I think she has answers for 99% of them. And the one is just, can you beat this level of field as well, or hang with them, which I think she can. That being said, like I said, I think you can go with basically any single-digit horse in here. But if you're looking for some value, I think Acanello, the 3, might be that double-digit horse who runs a big race. She's never ran further than a mile and 3/16, and that wasn't a great run. But just from a pedigree standpoint, in her win 2-back, you have to think she's going to really relish this mile and 3/8. That's a common theme that we see in these Breeders' Cup turf races that are longer, especially the Filly Mare Turf. Horses that are going shorter distances, they get to stretch out finally, and they really take advantage of it. So Acanello, I think, could be that horse at a price that runs a surprisingly big race. And now we'll move on to our next race, that is the Breeders' Cup Sprint, obviously highlighted by Jackie's Warrior, the talented 3-year-old who has had a very, very stellar year. But then, of course, you have a load of challengers who are each going to be throwing their hat in the ring. Of course, Dr. Schivel, Special Reserve, following C off of his win in the Vosburg. And obviously, veterans of this group like CZ Rocket and Matera Sky and Firenze Fire. So plenty of options for you. Basically, the entire spectrum is covered in terms of ages and running styles and stuff like that. But this is another favorite I'm going against. And it really wasn't my intention to go against these heavy favorites. It's just how I ultimately felt these races were going to play out. This is another race to me that seems like it's going to have a lot of speed, a lot of horses wanting to do, be mixing it up on the front. And really, here was my thought process. I explained this to Jack earlier, and I want to explain it to everybody listening. Following Siege, drawing the rail, means he has to send to the front, because when this horse wins, it is going wire to wire. And because he drew the rail, he can't be tucked in behind a horse like Jackie's Warrior directly to his outside. So John Velasquez almost has to send from the inside in order to give his horse the best chance to win. So automatically, that's a rival for Jackie's Warrior to have to hang with. And then, of course, course, you throw in Lexitonian and Special Reserve and Matera Sky. Matera Sky, I mentioned, Jasper Prince. He tried to go wire to wire in the sprint last year. Well, 2 years ago, Matera Sky was right up there. He was second early on in the 2019 Breeders' Cup Sprint behind Chancelot. So he's a horse that can run with these quick Americans early on. And I'm just worried about it. I think there's too much pace. And then you factor in my pick, Dr. Shivel, and how he's looked this year. 3 wins, 3 very impressively, 1 a grade 1 at Del Mar. In his running style, he can come from well off the pace and run a big race. It's how he normally does it. The fact he was on the lead in the Santa Anita Sprint was very different for him. He'd never done that before. But obviously because of that broken rein, he had to. But I just think that shows how talented he is. He's able to overcome things like that. But his win in the Bing Crosby and his allowance win in June, like I said, I think that really defines what this horse is going to be able to do. I love that he has the outside post. He's going to watch that speed. Flavien Prat's going to watch that speed unfold to his inside. He can then dictate how far off the pace he wants to be, how much dirt he wants to take with that many horses in front of him, and work out a perfect trip from there, mow him down like he did in the Bing Crosby. I know he's kind of a wise guy horse for, the Breeders' Cup overall, but especially this race, but I don't care because I do think he is in the best position to win it.
Yeah, and that was definitely a big concern that I had in this race, was the fact that I think they're going to go radioactive in here, and it was certainly a factor in the decision that I made in here. I think that this race sets up very, very well for a horse like CZ Rocket. CZ Rocket is my long shot horse in this race because he's 12-1 right now in the morning line. All the money's going to pour in on Jackie's Warrior. Dr. Chevelle obviously is going to be the wise guy horse. And then you also have horses coming out of graded stakes wins, Special Reserve, Following C, who will take their fair share of money. And CZ Rocket hasn't won a race since, I believe, the second of the 2 stakes that he won at Oaklawn. If I'm missing an allowance race or something between then, I apologize, but I don't believe he's won a stake race since the Count Fleet at Oaklawn. And that was at the point where we thought he might be the best sprinter in the country, and how times have changed from that, I understand. But, he certainly is primed to run a huge race in here. But that being said, I'm going to go back to something that I did last year. Last year in the Breeders' Cup, I picked against Gamine in the Filly and Mare Sprint because I thought that the race was going to be absolutely radioactive. And my thought process, I thought then was valid. Gamine absolutely has to be on the lead. Serengeti Empress absolutely has to be on the lead. There's no way that these 2 horses are not going to go at each other, blow this up, and have a radioactive pace meltdown. My thought process was there's no way that's not going to happen. Unfortunately, Gamine just ended up being better than all those horses, and I've looked back at that and saying, why did I do that? Because it would have just been so easy to look at that and say, Gamine is just better than all these horses. So I understand that they're going to go 21, probably sub 21, potentially in this race. I understand it's super, super hairy in terms of how he's going to pull it out. And I understand the post draw did not help him either. But at the end of the day, if I'm going to lose this race, I'm not going to reach and go with a long shot horse like a CZ Rocket or like an Aloha West in here. If I'm going to lose this race, I came to this decision 3 weeks ago before we even had the draw or anything like that. I came to the decision that if I'm going to lose this race, I'm going to go down with the best horse. And so in this race, I'm going to take the best sprinter that we've ever seen, Jackie's Warrior. And yes, I am saying that seriously. So now moving on to the next race, we're going to the Breeders' Cup Mile, which is always one of the races that causes the most shenanigans on the Breeders' Cup card. This is a race last year. Obviously, it blew up with Order of Australia winning at big odds. No one could have predicted that, but so many different ways you can go with in this race. However, for me, this race, over the course of chipping away at it, got rather simple. I'm not a fan of most of the Americans in here. If you listen to Racing Rundown for a while, you know that we really like what I'm now going to call the Big Three. And not that many people are going to call this the Big Three. And you might say, how can you call a Big Three a Big Three when one horse that they've only raced against each other, all 3 of them, twice, and one horse has won both of those races. But we've got the 3 best American milers. Mo Forza, Smooth Like Straight, and Hit the Road in this race. And they both run 1, 2, 3 in the last 2 efforts. And Smooth Like Straight has been a horse that has just been so consistent throughout the entire year. Just tough beat after tough beat after tough beat. But he's very respectable. Hit the Road's a grade 1 winner. And then you factor in Mo Forza. I mean, this is a horse that has one loss in an over 2-year stretch of time, and that one race was going way longer than a mile. I think Mo Forza, there were definitely ride problems there. That was a big story from the Pegasus Turf in 2020, but ride issues aside, I think the distance also was a little bit too far for him. But this is a horse that has won a grade 1 at Del Mar and has won 4 straight races all in a mile. This horse loves the mile. This horse loves Del Mar. He is a huge shot to win here. And then you have some really interesting Europeans. Space Blues is a horse I liked after his Group 1 win in France, but he's everyone else's, he's not even the wise guy horse anymore. He's just a favorite. So, the fact that I wasn't going to get a price on him, I kind of walked away from him. I also really liked Mother Earth. Mother Earth has been running some really good races overseas. She is coming out of a bang-up 5th where she ran in races with the 2 best milers in the world, Baid and Palace Pier, and she gave a good account of herself there running 5th. So she's won at a price. If she stays around that 8-1 range, absolutely give consideration to her. As for the other Americans, I'm not really a fan of the 2 Paulo Lobo horses, or Blowout is a little bit scary in here because she has pulled off some big wins before, but I've said many times how much I want nothing to do with Raging Bull, and that's not going to change here. But ultimately, you may be able to tell by how much praise I gave him. I'm going to go with Mo Forza in here. It's the safe pick for me, but this is the kind of race where it just doesn't. It seems like you're overthinking it if you go. Unless you really like Mother Earth or you really like Space Blues, and I like them, but I also like Mo Forza, and I like them similar, and I feel like if I were to find something, some minute detail in a Mother Earth or a Space Blues to go against Mo Forza, it just seems like it would be overthinking the race. This is a horse that loves the surface here. He's a grade 1 winner. He loves the mile. He's been waiting for this for over a year now. Unfortunately, he missed the Breeders' Cup Mile last year, and there were talks that he was, and probably true talks, that he was the best miler in 2020. Unfortunately, he got injured, wasn't able to stay healthy. We have him now in the Breeders' Cup Mile, and I think that he is going to give California a very good shot to win this race in here. So I'm going to be going with him in this race.
And I'll be joining Jack on Mo Forza. Listen, I have picked Smooth Like Straight every single race this year, and honestly, I think I picked him in his last 10 starts. And sure, he's won plenty, but he's also just broken my heart time after time, especially this year. 1 win in those 6 starts, and those last 3 have really just been very, not discouraging, but just heartbreaking. And I wanted to go back to him so badly because I didn't want to hop off at the wrong time, but at the same time, how is he going to beat Mo Forza when Mo Forza has just over? He shouldn't have really won the Del Mar Mile, but he did. He's coming off that almost year-long layoff into the Del Mar Mile. Had to make up ground on a slow pace that Smooth Like Straight was able to set. All these horses had runs that year, and he had nothing going for him. He could have easily laid down. He still won by a head. And then he comes out in the City of Hope. Everything went his way that day, but he still won easily. And that's just kind of been the central theme with this horse. That's why he's won as many races as he has. 8 of his last 9, and the only reason he lost was because of a bad ride, and maybe the distance was a little too long. But other than that, he's just been so good, and you can't go against him when he's been as good as he has been. I think he gets the right trip under Flavien Prat and sits 5th or 6th and just runs a very big race. I think Smooth Like Straight also runs a big one as well. And then if another horse, maybe a bit of a price, Pearls Galore. I thought her last 2 runs, despite them both being seconds, were really strong. I think she'll really fit the 2-turn mile that she's getting. I think she'll set a nice stalking trip, have a lot of good kick at the end. I just think Mo Forza mows everybody down and takes this one out.
And now we're going to move on to the next race, which is the Breeders' Cup Distaff. And if you're a regular listener of Racing Rundown, you know something about us in terms of female racehorses this year, fillies and mares. There's one particular horse, and if you go to our About section on YouTube, you can absolutely certainly see this. There's one horse that we've been talking about all year, and I know that this is a race that both of us have been waiting for a very long time to talk about. So I'm not going to introduce this race because I want to turn this over to the director, founder, and CEO of the Malathaat Direct Club, Eric DeCoster, and he will introduce this Breeders' Cup Distaff to you right now. So Eric, take it away.
Yeah, and if she wins this, the fan club will be releasing merch and all that. No, I'm totally kidding. That would be fun though, because this is going to be the Malathaat show. If anybody remembers that I don't know how many of our listeners are WWE fans. I'm not a WWE fan personally, but I do know that clip when John Cena walks out and he's wearing just a plain white shirt that says "The champ is here" over the chest, and then it's an arrow pointing down to the WWE Championship belt. That's basically going to be Malathat walking onto the Del Mar surface this upcoming Saturday, because the champ will be there. I'm telling you, this filly comes to work every single time and just wants to beat you. Obviously, that loss in the CCA Oaks was tough, but every other start has just been nothing short of remarkable, in my opinion. She's had reasons to lose quite a few of her races, especially that 3-race stretch from the Demoiselle to the Kentucky Oaks, and every single time she overcame and won. This is I said it with a lot of the horses I picked, because it's true with every horse I picked and every horse in this Breeders' Cup. This is the deepest that this horse has ever been, and it's true for Malathat. But at the same time, with how the race is going to set up, and then of course you just factor in her pure talent, she's going to take care of business. I have full confidence in that. Johnny V knows how to ride this Del Mar dirt track very, very well. He showed it in 2017. He can show it again here. I'll just dive into it. Latruska's getting beat. Even if it isn't by Malathat somehow, she's going to get beat. I think she's a horrible, horrible favorite. I've been saying it since late August. She's absolutely beatable. You just look at it. Private Mission drawing the rail. She's going to send right to the lead. She'll be joined by Latruska to the outside, and then Horologist and She Dares the Devil will go and press, and even that Japanese horse, Marshall Rain. They're all going to be right there contending for that same spot, and none of them are going to get it, and that's just going to create a wickedly quick pace that Malathat is going to, we know Malathat can be tactical. She's won going wire to wire. She did it in the Tempted a year ago. She won from coming from well off the pace. She showed that in her wins in the Alabama and the Ashland. So Johnny B is going to be able to pick whatever he wants to do with her and get that perfect trip, and the champ will walk out of Del Mar with a big, big victory. Have full confidence in her to take down Latruska and everybody else. That being said, if you're looking underneath Royal Flag, I know that she might take a fair share of money, but she's going to get a nice setup in front of her with that quick pace, and I think she'll be mowing horses down late. She just won't have enough time to get to Malathat.
And I will get into my thoughts on this race. I will make it short, at least on this end. I am with Eric on Malathat. She's just been so good this year. I understand the one loss and the Coaching Club American Oaks happened, and the knock on Malathat has always been the speed figures aren't that good, the times are whatever. I don't really care. Malathat took care of business in the Kentucky Oaks, took care of business in the Alabama, and there are people who are talking about how well Clairiere is going to run in this Distaff. Let's not forget that Malathat was in front when they passed the wire, not Clairiere in the Alabama Stakes. So Malathat's clearly the best 3-year-old filly. She's in my opinion, unless some shenanigans happen and either Private Mission or Clairiere somehow find a way to win this race, which I don't think is a very likely possibility. She's already wrapped up 3-year-old Eclipse Award honors. But I want to get into specifically my thoughts on Latruska in this race and why I'm going to go a little bit more in depth on why I think Latruska is also a very vulnerable favorite. Now, I'm going to say this right now. I'm going to say two things first in Latruska's defense. I thought coming into the year she was a very fine horse. I obviously didn't foresee her going on a tear and winning 4 grade 1s in a row and 5 grade 1s in total. That's just not something that you can predict. But the fact that she has done this is just a testament to the campaign that she's had as a whole this year. And I think she deserves to be the older female Eclipse Award winner. I don't think that regardless of what happens, she has earned that award, in my opinion. And I don't think that that's a controversial statement to say at all. Even if She Dares the Devil wins. And I used to think if She Dares the Devil wins, she gets it. But Latruska has had the campaign for the whole year, and that's something that people complain about, and I am certainly one of them. So I appreciate what she has done for horse racing this year. She's running all the big races. She's running pretty much everything you could have expected her to run it, and she's won them all with the exception of the Azeri Stakes. Now, with that being mentioned, I have to get into the reasons why I don't think Latruska is as good as people might say she is. So, you look at the 2 races that I'm going to talk about first are the Azeri and the Apple Blossom. The Apple Blossom is the one outlier race in Latruska's resume that is the one race that's scaring the hell out of me because while she was on the lead like she was in most of the other races, Monomoy Girl headed her. And you don't need me to tell you what kind of horse Monomoy Girl was. 2-time Breeders' Cup Distaff winner, future Hall of Famer. Monomoy Girl headed Latruska and was in front in the stretch in that Apple Blossom. Latruska came back and got Monomoy Girl. So that race right there is scaring the hell out of me because I can't say 100% that that's not going to happen again. But I have more. There's more evidence that in the line of Latruska is somewhat beatable in this race, so I'm going to go with that for this race. Now, looking at the one race that she's lost this year, that was in the Azeri Stakes. She did not get put on the lead in there. It was a mistake by the rider Joel Rosario, but the fact of the matter remains that she didn't get put on the lead there. She also almost won the race because she was closing, but again, it should be maintained that she did not win the race because she was not on the lead. Now, no one's saying she's not going to be on the lead. She's going to be on the lead in this race, and that's where you get to the other weaknesses with her. The last 4 races have all been the same race. Ogden Phipps, Fleur de Lis, Personal Ensign, Spinster. They've all been the same thing. She going out there and merry-go-rounding them and holding on and winning the race, and everyone saying how great of a filly that she is. And I'll talk about the Ogden Phipps first. That was the start against She Dares the Devil. She Dares the Devil did not go to the lead there because they were trying things out with her. That was a mistake. They let Latruska go out there, have it her own way, and She Dares the Devil got beat by 3 3/4 lengths. Latruska is not 3 3/4 lengths better than She Dares the Devil, and I think to believe that is misguided because She Dares the Devil's a horse that she needs to do her running on the lead. When she's not on the lead, she's like Latruska. She doesn't run well. And Brad Cox and Florent Giroux are smart guys. I know that they are not going to get their horse beat the same way that they did earlier this year. I know that Brad Cox has watched that replay and said, we got to beat Latruska here. How do we beat her? We got to take it to her early. If She Dares the Devil isn't on the lead, you got to be near Latruska because Latruska has never had to deal with a pace presence in really any of these races this year, even in the Apple Blossom. The reason that the Apple Blossom, like I said, is scaring me is because she came back in there after she was headed. But, Fleur de Lis, there wasn't really much to be gained from there. And then the last 2 races, the Personal Ensign and the Spinster were not the most impressive races in the world. She only won by 1.5 lengths in the Personal Ensign, and there were horses that were catching her. And those horses were Royal Flag, Dunbar Road, and Bonnie South. Not in that order, but those horses were certainly catching her. Now, Royal Flag is a horse that I like very well underneath, but I've never been Dunbar Road's biggest fan, and I've never been Bonnie South's biggest fan. And, I would think, and I should correct myself, she won that race by a 1/2 length, not 1.5 lengths. But Latruska, if she's Horse of the Year, extreme lock for the Distaff, like everyone's saying that she is, I would think Latruska would need to be beating those horses by more. And, it's not like she had any duress that was causing her to be caught late in the race. Moving on to the next start, the Spinster, she won by 1 3/4 lengths there. Watching the race, it may have seemed like that she got more. That's why you got to look at the chart for this race. But she was getting caught late by Dunbar Road also. She was in front of 3.5 lengths in the stretch, and it's not like she was really being geared down. It's not like Irad really, really geared her down. Dunbar Road was just catching her. And I've already said, I'm not Dunbar Road's biggest fan, but Dunbar Road is going to have a huge shot in this Distaff. You couple all that. She's never had to face any serious challenge against her throughout this stretch of races. You also keep in mind that she's running up against Brad Cox, who has already lost her, knows what he has to do to beat her. They beat her once in the Azeri, and that was by going to the lead and getting it. They're probably not going to get the lead because Latruska's probably going to beat them there, but they're not going to let Latruska go out there and do her own thing. The other thing that I don't think enough people are realizing is Private Mission is also in this race. And say what you want about Bob Baffert as a trainer, whatever, you may not like him or all these things. Bob Baffert is very good at making sure his horses are in the best position to win their races. And Eric said it perfectly. Private Mission is going to go out there. She also got the rails. So, there's not too much speed inside of her with Royal Flag and Malathot, but she's going to have to assert her position early. And I know that Bob Baffert wants her to be forwardly placed because that's what she has to do. And Bob Baffert's not going to just let someone else go out there and win a Breeders' Cup race just because he doesn't want to get his 3-year-old filly burned up in a pace duel. So the reality of the situation is Latruska's going to have to face something she has not had to face this year. And not enough people are saying that. I was pleasantly surprised with the amount of people who are in agreement with both of us that do think she's beatable, but not enough people realize that Latruska has this one glaring weakness. And who knows? She may just be better than all these horses. But when there's a horse that has a glaring weakness, like Latruska was, and it's staring me right in the face, it's not something that I'm going to just say, oh, it doesn't matter, she's just better than all of them. That also keeps in mind that Malathot's a very good 3-year-old filly. You have other horses in here that ran very nice last races, Clariere and Royal Flag. And then Dunbar Road, I already said 3 times already. I'm not her biggest fan, but she's going to be in a good position to win this race as well. So I think that they're going to go out there. I think that Latruska is going to be a casualty of Private Mission and She Dares the Devil needing to go out there, and that's going to open it up for horses like Royal Flag, like Malathaat, like Clairiere, like Dunbar Road. My big play in this race is I'm obviously picking Malathaat, but I'm going to be playing Malathaat above a Chad Brown trifecta with Royal Flag and Dunbar Road, and I'm going to box that in here. So that's my big play for this race, and that's my big feeling with this Distaff. Latruska, if you think she's better than all of them, then sure, go with her. But for me, there's that glaring weakness there, and I gotta take my shot against her. If she wins, oh well, I'll tip my cap to her, give her whatever Eclipse Award accolades you want to give her. She would have earned it, but I don't think I can. I don't think she can do it, and I need to see her show me that she can. Like I mentioned, if she does, all the credit to her, tip my cap to her. We'll be back here next week saying how wrong we were if this happens, but I don't think it's going to happen. And now we're going to move on to the next race on the card, which is the Breeders' Cup Turf. This race, like the mile to a certain degree, seemed like it was rather cut and dry once looking into it from a further level. And I'm not crazy about any of the, or most of the Americans in here. Chad Brown's higher price pair of horses in here. I've said my fair share of nice things about Tribhuvan, and Rock Emperor. I don't know how the hell that happened in the Joe Hurst Turf Classic, but I think that's an absolute aberration race. But Tribhuvan, depending on what the setup of this race is, he may be a horse that you might be able to get him at a nice price with a show wager. But I think that's about the most with him. But most of the other Americans, United, Acclimate. Not crazy about. Gaffoe always finds a way to get himself beat, and I know that Eric has been Gaffoe's biggest champion for weeks and weeks on this podcast, but Gaffoe at this point just finds a way to get himself beat all the time. And this race ultimately for me came down to just a few horses, because Aidan O'Brien's pair, not crazy about either. Broome in Japan, probably rather average horses. Walton Street, sure, his race in Canada was great, but he's going up against some tougher horses in here. Not a huge fan of that. And then also Domestic Spending, I wasn't a huge fan of the effort last out. So it came down to me between the two horses coming from France, Tiona and Tarnawa, and then Yabir, the Jockey Club Derby winner. And I ended up going with Yabir. For one thing, I just thought that the Jockey Club Derby was too good of a race to pass up. He won by 4 3/4 lengths there, and it is worth mentioning the horse that he beat for second, Soldier Rising, even though he didn't run well in the I believe the race was the Hill Prince, where he lost to Public Sector. That was not what he wants to do. He's going to be a very fine older horse next year. Soldier Rising, he was also second in the Saratoga Derby. So he beat a good horse in there, and then also Slick Back, who's an honest horse, and then also finished in front of the Belmont Derby winner, Bolshoi Ballet. So there's some good form in the Jockey Club Derby that he beat. And the reason I'm going against Tarnawa is one thing, Tarnawa is going to be a heavy favorite in this race. And I have said about the Breeders' Cup several times. Got to find your favorites to take, and you got to find your favorites to fade. And Tarnawa seems like one of those favorites for me. The other thing is her trainer came out earlier this week and talked about how he wasn't crazy about the ground for her. If the trainer is talking about a horse from Europe in an article in America, being nervous about whether or not she's going to like the firm ground, that's a little bit of a red flag for me. I'm not picking against Tarnawa just because of the firm turf situation, but it's certainly a red flag and something that allowed me to sort of steer myself towards Yabir. Like I said, once again, prime thing with Yabir is the Jockey Club Derby was just too good for him. Just too good. His effort there for me to pass up. So he's going to be my pick in here. It is also worth mentioning once again, William Buick, who had first call for Godolphin, had the choice between Walton Street and Yabir. He chose Yabir. One final note, 12-1 on the morning line for Yabir. If he's anywhere close to that, you got to use him in some facet. I was expecting this horse might be second or third choice. If I get him somewhere near 12-1, I'm going to be super, super happy, because this is a horse who's a lot better than 12-1 in a Breeders' Cup. Like I said, once again, you might be able to find a saver with Chad Brown in here, but I think that this race is rather straightforward. If you like Tarnawa, if you liked her win last year, you think that she's going to get the firm turf, and you're just not concerned about going against favorites, she's absolutely a horse to go with. There's nothing on her talent-wise that says she can't win the Breeders' Cup Turf.
And for me in this spot, I'm going to be going to Chad Brown. I'm kind of realizing now almost all my picks in the grass races are Americans, but I just wasn't in love with any of the Euros, especially in this race. They're good for sure, but Tarnawa was good. I just didn't like the post she drew. I think, being parked out in 13 is a bit tough, certainly overcomable, but tough nonetheless. And, for domestic spending, I know he's 4-1 second choice on the morning line. I could easily see that floating because this is a horse who's been forgotten since his loss in the Arlington Million. And I'm not saying the other name, the Arlington Million. But we got to be real here. Sure, it wasn't impressive, but 2 Emmys just stole it. He went wire to wire. He went 52-2 for the half mile, 116-3 for 3/4. He walked the dog, and domestic spending to lose by only a neck shows he's a good horse. And you go back to his wins in the Turf Classic and the Manhattan. They're very, very impressive, strong efforts, especially the Manhattan. He blew me away with that win in that spot. My biggest concern is getting a 1.5 miles, but I feel like it's overcomable. I can't believe I've used that word twice, but I think he can do that just fine based off how he's finished off his 1.25 mile races as nicely as he has. I also think he'll set a really nice trip under Flavien Prat, being able to just kind of tuck in the early going and sit just a couple lengths off the lead and make a big run when the time comes. He's been very, very impressive, and I think he has a big, big chance to run big in here. And like I said, I do think he'll probably be higher than 4-1 because I think Tarnawa is going to take a lot of money. I think a bunch of the Euros are going to take more money than their morning lines indicate, and that's obviously going to make it all the better for this horse.
So now we're going to move on to the feature race of the 2 weekends, the climax of the entire Breeders' Cup weekend, and that is the big one, the $6 million Breeders' Cup Classic. 9 horses for this race, a bit shorter than we might have hoped it to be, but still 9 horses, a very, very fun race as the Breeders' Cup Classic always is, and once again, very contentious. You have a couple horses in here who I think this race could shape up a lot similarly to the Breeders' Cup Distaff. There's a couple horses that absolutely need the lead in here. There's other horses that are going to keep them honest, and then you have your few closers in here that I'm not going to say are going to get disrespected, but may end up floating up because of the money that some of the top horses are going to take. Obviously, you have Nix Go, who has been the big horse of the year. He won the Whitney at Saratoga, won the Lucas Classic last out. Both of those were nice races. Won the Pegasus World Cup in the early part of the year. Did have some weird stretch where he lost the Saudi Cup, lost the Met Mile. Just absolutely does not want one turn. That's the conclusion that I came to with this horse. But he's absolutely going to want to be on the lead. Then you have your Kentucky Derby winner, Medina Spirit. Medina Spirit's also another horse that has to be on the lead. I believe Eric is going to reference this when he talked about Medina Spirit, but you can go back to some of our Kentucky Derby previews from this year and see what we've said about Medina Spirit. This is a horse that 100% needs to lead. You couple that in where you have horses like Hot Rod Charlie and Art Collector who have tactical early speed, can be on the lead if need necessitates, but don't have to be there, but they will certainly be up close to keep them honest. Remember, in the Belmont Stakes, Hot Rod Charlie did not know that Rock Your World stumbled at the race's expected pace setter. Flavien Prat didn't know that. He sent up Hot Rod Charlie expecting to have to outgun a Rock Your World to lead. Ultimately didn't happen because of the stumble for Rock Your World, but that's the kind of speed that Hot Rod Charlie has in this race. So that's why in this race, I'm going to be staying away from the speed horses in here, because even though Nix Go scares me, and Medina Spirit, if for some reason none of this happens and all the speed horses just don't show up at all and Medina Spirit finds himself parked out on the lead alone, that it is gonna end the same way that it ended last year with Authentic. And you might say to me, well, Jack, you said that about Authentic last year, that he was gonna go out there and get pressed early and someone else is gonna win the race. The difference is this year is that there's actually a horse that has to be on the lead in addition to Medina Spirit, and that's Nix Go. There's no way that anyone's beating Nix Go to the lead in this race, and if for some odd reason that does happen, the amount of speed that you are going to have to expend to beat Nix Go to the lead is going to doom you in the race, I would think, unless Nix Go is not I can't foresee a situation where that doesn't happen. So I'm staying away from speed in here, and I'm going to go to the horse that's just been the most consistent throughout the entire year, throughout his entire career, and that's Essential Quality. Essential Quality has just been the model of consistency forever. It may not be the prettiest, he may take a while to get it done, the margins of victory may not be that impressive visually, but he gets the job done, and that's the most important thing with Essential Quality. That's what he has done his entire career, barring one race, the Kentucky Derby, where he had 2 major excuses, the wide trip, the start where he had some problems there, didn't set him up well for the race. Everything else, he's just taking care of business. And you can go through all the horses that he's beaten in this race. He beat Hot Rod Charlie, and not just in this race, all the horses that he's beaten through the year. He beat Hot Rod Charlie, he beat Midnight Bourbon, he beat Rombauer. All those are very good horses, and that's not even taking into account some of the more horses that he ran against underneath just for the sake of time. So I'm not going to overthink this race. I really liked Max Player in here, and I think Max Player is going to be, could end up being a good value in this race, because I think horses are going to, odds on some of the horses like your Nix Goes and your Medina Spirits will float down, and a Max Player will float up. I think he's a good horse to use underneath, but I just didn't want to overthink this race. Essential Quality has been beating all these horses all year. He's been the best horse, the most consistent. It's not complicated, at least in my opinion. Essential Quality is my pick for this Breeders' Cup Classic.
And he is my pick as well. Here's the deal. This was a race I've been overthinking for a very long time, mainly bouncing around, your favorites between Nix Go, Essential Quality, and then, of course, Hot Rod Charlie and Art Collector were kind of the other two, kind of the B-level horses in this race. Not that they're B-level horses, but the second-tier horses in my mind. But then I saw a tweet this morning, and it was something I'd known for a while, but I just kind of needed that reminder that the top 5 from last year's Breeders' Cup Juvenile have turned out to be exceptional racehorses. Obviously, you have Essential Quality and Hot Rod Charlie, your top 2 running in the Breeders' Cup Classic now this year. I don't know if that's the first time that's ever happened, but I have a good feeling it is, if not, second or third time. Then you go back to, keep in mind who was third. He danced a lot of dances this year. He was really good. Fourth was your Breeders' Cup Sprint favorite this year, Jackie's Warrior. And then fifth was Rombauer. Rombauer, of course, our Preakness winner this year. But here's why that was important to me, and this is why Essential Quality became my solidified Breeders' Cup Classic pick after reading that tweet. I realized that we don't give Essential Quality enough credit for all that he has done this year, especially in terms of who he has beat. Rombauer went off 11-1 in the Preakness purely because he had been throttled by Essential Quality on 2 occasions that made him look like a subpar horse. But when that horse was able to get away from Essential Quality, he was able to put him away and win the second leg of America's Triple Crown, beating Medina Spirit and Midnight Bourbon and a bunch of other good horses in the process. Point is, that, and Jack mentioned it as well with some of the horses he's beaten this year, Essential Quality. That's all he does. He just beats who's ever put in front of him, and they're all elite racehorses. That's all he's beaten in the past year or so. And I don't think that adding Nix Go and Art Collector and Max Player into the equation changes any of that. They aren't really tougher, in my opinion, than the Hot Rod Charlies and the Medina Spirits and the Midnight Bourbon, so on and so forth. So obviously, the biggest stage he ever performed on, it didn't go well. But that was with a horrible trip. It's not going to work out that way. He's going to have the pace to close into. I mentioned it after the Belmont. My favorite thing, and I think the Travers as well, my favorite thing about Essential Quality is his tactical ability. It's the best tactical ability we've seen in this country in a long time. He can be right up on the lead. He can go wire to wire. He can come from last. He's done everything imaginable, and it's what makes him a brilliant racehorse, and that is what is going to win him this year's Breeders' Cup Class. Because Nix Go is going to send, but I don't think he can get the mile and a quarter. Medina Spirit, I mentioned it in May before he was even the Kentucky Derby winner. I mentioned in our individual preview of him that this is a horse who needs the lead to win races, and obviously he did that in the Kentucky Derby. Nix Go is not going to let him get to the lead. And then you have all the other stalkers. Hot Rod Charlie, sure, he finished in front of Essential Quality once, but when things are fair and square, Essential Quality gets the job done against him every time. So point is, Essential Quality has either beaten you or will beat you, because that's just what he does. He beats good racehorses. So he's obviously my pick in this year's Classic. I will say, kind of my value in this race would be Art Collector. I've been really impressed with him since switching to the Belmont barn. I'm just skeptical of who he's beaten this year and really throughout his career, but I think he still runs a big race as he steps up and tastes this real big acid test for the first time.
And with that being mentioned, that's it for this week's episode. I do want to end this off on one more note. If you're a longtime listener of Racing Rundown, I started this off by myself. We're getting actually very close to 3 years of Racing Rundown, so we appreciate always all the support we get from the viewers. But Racing Rundown, in the degree that it is, would not be possible without this guy who was along with me for the ride. Our recording session right now is pushing over 5 hours for this. So Racing Rundown would not be what it is without Eric, my passionate as equally as me co-host, and I am mentioning this now because yesterday was our 2 years of bringing Eric on the podcast. So Eric, Racing Rundown wouldn't be what it is without you and your work for the podcast and for everything is, as always, greatly appreciated. I know that I'm sure the viewers enjoy all the content that you've produced for Racing Rundown, and the show would not be where it is without you. So I'm going to take this opportunity now at the end of this Breeders' Cup episode to thank you for the 2 years that you put into Racing Rundown, and hopefully to the many more years and many more, hopefully, great picks that will come in the future.
Well, thank you, Jack. That does mean a lot. That was completely unexpected, so I do appreciate that. It's been so much fun being able to talk racing, not only with you, Jack, but share our thoughts, and then, especially in our YouTube previews and episodes that we do, being able to interact with the listeners, and it's always a good time, whether they like what we have to say or not. And to you, Jack, I mean, you're the guy who Jack's the one who records all these episodes. He's the one that puts everything together. He's clipping these things. He's putting it out. He does all the dirty work so we can get our opinions on, this sport out into the world. So, Jack, thank you for that. I know you didn't do this to fish for compliments, but I might as well take the opportunity to commend you on all of your good work, and obviously all that you bring to the table from, knowledge of the sport standpoint. So it's been very fun these past 2 years. I can't believe this is already the third Breeders' Cup that we've done together. It's crazy how quickly they've gone by. And, yeah, let's hope for many, many more, especially if they can go as well as some of our picks have gone.
And with that being mentioned, that's it for this week's episode, but it is not it for Racing Rundown's Breeders' Cup content this year. To compensate, in addition to having this episode be on YouTube, we will also be doing a live show, or at least I will be doing it. TBD whether or not Eric's going to be joining us, but other people will be joining me, and that will be Thursday, a little bit after 9:30 Eastern. Will also mention that we do have Jay Pribben of the Daily Racing Forum joining us for our annual Breeders' Cup Power Hour that we do with him. So that we're recording that around 9 o'clock Eastern. So 9:30 Eastern, a little bit after that is when that show will be. But you can come hang out with me, maybe Eric as well, and some other people through who are also YouTubers or Twitter handicappers or people like that, and talk about Breeders' Cup with us. And we'll get to some of the stuff that we weren't able to get to here, because even though this episode is pushing an hour and 40 minutes, there's still so many thoughts that we were not able to get to. So we'll see you on that, and then we will see you back here on YouTube and on our various podcast platforms next week when we do this big Breeders' Cup recap. And hopefully we're happy people recapping some nice winners. But whether all our picks win or all our picks run last, we'll still be back here next week. Have a good one. Most importantly, if you are playing these Breeders' Cup races, good luck. And once again, thanks go to all the viewers once again for the support and the views that have come in over the past pretty close to 3 years. We'll see you for all the content in the future. And once again, if you are not subscribed to us on YouTube or on our various podcast platforms, make